You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your comments below. Be sure to smash that like button. LSU is going to be on the practice field on Thursday, and the roster is going to look notably different than the last time we saw LSU on a football field. That was for the Texas Bowl in Houston against Kansas State, when LSU had fewer than 40 scholarship players available. Ed Ogeron left this program in ruin. He was negligent in his inability to recruit and maintain his roster, to manage his roster, positions, recruiting, all of it. And Brian Kelly inherited an awful situation. It's almost unfathomable that 2 years removed from the greatest season in college football history, you could have what LSU put on the field against Kansas State. Yet that was the reality. Brian Kelly updated the roster. I'm going to warn you, this cut runs about a minute, but he goes into great detail about what he inherited, where they are now, and where they're going to be.
You know, on January 4th, we had 39 scholarship players. As I said, on August 4th, when we report our first day, we're going to get to 84. We might not get to 85, but we're going to be at 84. So we'll get the roster back to where it needs to be in very short order. You know, mid-years, as you know, we took 17. Look, that is not how I will build a program here at LSU year in and year out. But we needed to address that gap that I just mentioned to you. For us to get to 84, you know, this isn't AAA. This is the SEC. So you better have a full roster of really good football players when you show up. You can't have 72 scholarship players, or the guys running down on the field, they're not going to be SEC players. So we had to address it. We did. We've got within there a number of guys, 10 in particular from the state of Louisiana, that are either high school or mid-year transfers that love the state, that wanted to play here, and are coming back to play here.
This is not the AAA. Mark that down. Remember it. Like, that's what this roster was when he got here. It was a AAA roster. You can't compete and can't win in the SEC with the roster the way it was. And I'm going to be really direct, and a lot of you don't love hearing me say this, but still, the roster still right now does not resemble a roster close to being able to compete at the highest level in the Southeastern Conference. You can be and should be very excited about a lot of the transfers that LSU was able to bring in and the way they were able to supplement the roster and all that. But this is still not a championship caliber roster. They are weaker in a lot of spots than they were when the season kicked off a year or even when the season ended. So, because of transfers. But he's filled a lot of those gaps to be able to field a team with enough players and depth to be able to withstand transfers or injuries or defections or academic, whatever it may be. You got to have numbers, and that's what he addressed. He was very clear. This is not how we're going to build the program, Brian Kelly said, but it's how they had to do it now so they could find a way to compete this year. One other thing Brian Kelly said, we're going to get into some of the position battles specifically here in a second. He did talk, though, about building on observations, about how he and the staff took the time to watch everything all the evidence they had, all of the film they had on these players to learn what they have, and then they'll build on it from there.
We looked at every game that the guys played last year, and that's important from what they did well, what they didn't do well, what they can improve on, and then we just put that away and then went to work on where they are right now. And because sometimes, like you said, some guys want a fresh start, but some other guys, want an opportunity to build off of what they did last year. Because, quite honestly, you look at some of these guys and, they don't have pads on, and some look better than the other. And then you look at a guy like Jack Besh who just makes plays. And I'm not saying he doesn't look good, but you watch a Hilton run around, and that young man, he can run all day. And then Jack Best, you know what he can do watching him on film. So you want to build off of guys, and you want to let other guys grow at the same time. I think this spring allows us to kind of build on those observations.
So how about that shout out to Chris Hilton, who was a highly recruited player out of Zachary. And, I mean, I don't know if y'all saw him in track, the indoor meet. I mean, dude's winning the high jump. I mean, it's incredible. And you wonder, like, how did that guy not get on the field? I get there's a log jam at receiver. I'm not sitting there saying, look, because if Hilton's in there, someone comes off the field to get it. But, I mean, the first catch he made was in the bowl game, and he housed it from like 80 yards out. I mean, he's a game breaker. You got to find a way to get that kid involved, right? And they didn't before. But to that end, remember, Brian Kelly's talking about inheriting a roster with 39 players, and it had to supplement with the mid-years. He's like, that's not how we're going to build the roster. We had to now. The other part of it, just timing. It's March 24th. Typically, for as long as I've covered LSU, spring started before spring break. And they sort of had spring break sandwiched in between spring football because those dates didn't count. So now it's later than it's ever been. And listen to the explanation from Brian Kelly why they had to start spring break later. Spring football later.
There's not necessarily a benefit in terms of extending. We would have benefited more in terms of extending the calendar. We weren't prepared to practice. So we needed more time with our guys. We needed more conditioning elements with our football team. Just frankly, just needed more time with them. So what you'll see is, like next year, we'll go before spring break so we can extend, because you don't have to count the break as countable days when you extend that way. So there is no real benefit other than we weren't prepared yet, in my eyes. We needed more time in the weight room. We needed more time developing some of the things that I talked about earlier before we jumped into practices.
He said they weren't prepared to practice. They're starting at the end of March because they weren't prepared to practice. They needed more time in the weight room. They need to be physically ready to go get on the field. They needed more time to do that. That's why they're starting spring football as late as they are right now. I mean, I keep trying my best to temper expectations year one. But listen to what this is the winningest active coach in college football. LSU's head coach right now is the winningest active coach in college football. He's won everywhere he's been. He's been around a long time. And he's telling you, I had 39 players. I had to take all these mid-years just so I didn't look like a AAA squad. We're starting spring football later because we weren't even good. We weren't even good enough to be on the field to practice until we got in better shape. Like, y'all, he's got a hell of a job year one ahead of him. He has a steep climb year one ahead of him because he didn't inherit the team that won a national title. He inherited a poop show is what he inherited. And he and his staff they've done an amazing job already of rebuilding this roster. But y'all, they got a long way to go. I did ask Brian Kelly the remaining positions of need, if they know right now what positions they'd like to target to add more players before August 4th, when he said they're going to have 84 players on the roster by August 4th. I don't know why he said 84 and not 85. He said they're going to be at 84 by August 4th. What other positions of need are there?
I think our depth situation at tight end is a concern of mine. I think that's an area that we need to continue to build on, and not sure that it's a quick fix. I think it's something that we're still going to have to look at. And there may be some people that are on our roster that might have to change positions and play that position. We're going to have to address it one way or the other. So it's still a concern. There might be some movement there in the transfer portal after spring ball, but it is a concern. We're not done on the offensive line. That's still an area that we're actively involved in as well. So I would leave it at those two areas in particular.
It is so refreshing to hear a coach who's candid, but also feels like he's in control. Tight end is obvious. You don't have a tight end. I mean, you signed Taylor out of Florida this year. You got Cole Taylor, Mason Taylor, Jason Taylor's son. You got Cole Taylor as well, but you don't have. You got God bless Jack Mashburn, the walk-on who out of necessity played that position for you last year and did a great job. Don't misunderstand, but like LSU's used to producing professional players, and Brian Kelly has pumped tight ends into the NFL. He don't have one right now. Jack Bech is a great player, but he's a receiver. He's not a tight end. If you want an attached tight end, a traditional tight end, which Brian Kelly has always had in his offenses at Notre Dame, he don't have it right now. So they got to go get one. Wait till spring happens. Somebody somewhere is not happy with their lot at their current school. They hit the portal, and LSU goes and plucks a tight end. That's got to happen. Offensive line, he said, we're not we might not be done. Not we could add another. He said, we're not done on the offensive line. They don't have a center. I mean, Brad Davis has already said they're cross-training 6 players right now to try to find a starting center. So if a center hits the portal, boom, get him. We're not done on the offensive line, he said. They're recruiting Steen, who's in the portal right now at Vanderbilt, has played both tackles, play either side. You're replacing 4 starters on the offensive line. You got Cam Wire back, but there's no guarantee he's going to be your left tackle this year. You bring in Steen, he's probably your day 1 starter over there. So that was definitive. There was no ambiguity. We're not done on the offensive line. You can tell. They still got spots to fill, and they've still got scholarships. They're willing to fill them, and it looks like they're going to. So a lot of work to do for Brian Kelly. It's exciting, though, and it's refreshing. It's like planting seeds and starting to water it and till the soil and watch it grow, give it light and nurture it to see it grow into that beautiful tree. Like, that's where this is headed, and you have the right person that knows how to do this. It's just going to take time and patience and diligence from a really talented staff putting this roster together and maximizing them. And it all starts with spring football getting underway. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.